I've been doing the work of equity for a while now, and I call it the work of making sure that people have what they need. That's what equity is to me. And oftentimes we can get very elusive and not clear on what we're actually wanting to move forward. Because of our history, and our meaning America, but let's be clear, every nation, every country has its own history of how it has treated people that someone said was less than. Because of our history, it has been made to be very difficult to have clear and honest conversations about what people need to thrive. And so I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about what is equity, what are some red flag responses, and what is not equity. So I do know that we can go to extremes on both ends. And extremes on both ends are not helpful and they don't advance people having what they need to thrive. Equity also asks, what do I or we, perhaps as an organization, avoid talking about, and how does it impact those impacted? Right? So there's an issue, we just kind of ignore it, we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to address it. How does it impact those that we're ignoring? And then equity also asks, do people feel safe sharing their equitable or inequitable experiences? And how do we know? So, how is your organization having these conversations on a consistent basis in a way that is safe, that is inviting, where people can be comfortable knowing and expressing their concerns? And people can also be comfortable not knowing because perhaps they haven't had these experiences. And so, how does a safe environment happen? And how do we help to cultivate that? And then equity also asks, how do we work not to have no problems surrounding equity, but how do we work to have a fair way to work through those problems, to work through those issues, and to work through those concerns? I always think it's dangerous to try to have a goal of, we don't want any bias, we don't want any, well, yeah. I just don't think that's realistic. What I do know is clear is that we can work to create an environment where it can't thrive, right? Where it can't be the dominant space that people are existing in regarding inequities. We can work to make sure that we have an inviting, a graceful, but yet a very clear environment, acceptable and what is not acceptable. I want to give you a quick example of a situation where it was to the extreme. So I was having some conversations with staff when I was working with the agency, and we were just talking about what do people need in order to feel safe. Safe regarding physical safety, safe regarding psychological safety, because it was a conversation that we had not had as a region and came clear through some different events that we needed to have those conversations. So I was doing a listening session in one of the five offices that I was responsible for. And one woman, people were providing excellent examples of feeling safe, being safe, providing suggestions, thinking through what needed to happen to change the culture so that safety was on the top of my mind. Then someone said, well, I don't feel safe when my colleagues celebrate holidays. I said, okay, well, talk to me a little bit more about that. So she just began saying that she doesn't celebrate holidays. And when other people celebrate holidays, such as Christmas or Thanksgiving or 4th of July, it just really, it brings her to a place because her past experiences with holidays have been very traumatic. And she believes that we need to have an office where people don't celebrate holidays. So we're not doing that. Like, you're going to the extreme and you're taking your trauma and your experiences, and now you're saying, because of what I've been through, no one else should be able to celebrate, to decorate their own offices. It's not like it's a statewide thing. It's just this is a thing that someone does and it brightens up their day. They decorate their office, maybe they dress up, all the different things that we're able to do as individuals. She wants someone else to stop because of how it makes her feel. That is taking it to the extreme. We're not doing that. What equity says is you can choose not to celebrate holidays in your space and where you're in. You can also choose to celebrate different holidays that perhaps your colleagues don't celebrate. That's what equity says. People being able to choose for themselves, doing it in a way that's responsible, and that's not infringing upon other people's rights in that regard. So that's the extreme. And the extreme response would be, okay, well, since someone doesn't feel comfortable with holidays, we're now not going to permit any holidays to be celebrated personally by you. No dressing up, no dressing your offices, no saying, happy holidays, no saying Merry Christmas, no saying Happy Thanksgiving, no, none of that, because this person feels offended by that. That's an environment that is stifling and people won't stay in. And so we need to be clear that you can have extreme responses to sometimes people's trauma and experiences that they've been through, and that's not creating an equitable environment. I am really committed to having deeper conversations about what equity actually is and how to understand when we're having, I call it red flag responses to equity. So when someone is bringing you a valid concern that they're experiencing, and we begin to do things such as reasoning, oh, well, I'm sure they didn't mean anything by it. We defend, well, that couldn't have been what actually happened. We clam up, we accuse, we blame, we attack, we judge, we avoid, or we numb out, right? These are some red flag responses to equity. But this is the truth. These are just red flag responses when someone tells you something that perhaps you're uncomfortable with or that you hadn't heard before. It's new information. When we think about equity and when we think about our responses to equity, we have to think about it from the perspective of how we communicate in a way that is open and that is honest and that we actually exercise active listening. There's so much more that I can say about this. I actually created a journal called Deep Observations. It's a journal to write your equity moments that you may encounter, because oftentimes we experience some things and we just experience it, but we don't do anything with it. We don't journal it out. We don't write it out. We don't get it out. And it's not as if with every experience, good or bad, that you may encounter that you have to do something with it, but it's just a good practice of understanding what has happened to you in that moment so that it doesn't stay in your body, right? So that you get it out. And I know that it's so important to get it out. I remember I was in a workshop and they were asking us to have these small group discussions and to have conversations about moments that we encountered that were, biased or racist or whatever the case may be. And I was just kind of like, okay, this is an interesting exercise. I don't think I've done this before. And so I said, okay, well, I want to participate. And so we're going through it and I'm telling this story of an experience that I had within that year. And it kind of made me a little emotional. And I thought, oh, I haven't talked about this. Like, it's not something that I've actually talked about or processed. So then later on that day, I had Bible study and I am the Bible study teacher. And so I thought, I want to do this exercise with the congregation. And so I explained what we were doing, but then I also said basically like a now what? Okay, so you experience this, now what? What is the next step? And I gave everyone a piece of paper, and there were adults and children in that room. And when I tell you that some of the experiences that our children had, I was just flabbergasted on some of the things that they experienced that they just don't talk about. And it just opened my eyes to realize that we have to do a better job of getting it out and then asking that next question, now what? And so in the journal, We do that. We get it out, but then it's the now what? Okay, what do I do with this? Is it, I just needed to process it? Is it, okay, someone needs to help me with this? Is it, okay, I need to take this to my supervisor? Is it, okay, I was tripping a little bit. This actually wasn't a thing. Because it can be any of those things, but until we actually get it out of our head, then it just kind of stays in there and it does something. It just kind of rolls around. Or we bury it and then something else happens and it just compounds. And so this deep observations journal is something that I know is going to be helpful to people who are committed to processing, committed to emotional intelligence regarding equity. And I know that it'll help you go deep. Ultimately, how we can make sure people have what they need in order to thrive. If you are interested in learning more about the family history in America and how the child welfare system was even built, I want to invite you to dive into the online and on-demand Skin Deep, the History of Child Welfare by Race course. Because you're coming from the Skin Deep podcast community, I'll have a special discount code for you in the show notes below. Let's dive deeper on behalf of families.